Welcome to About Untold History. I am your narrator, Elias Untold Vance. Throughout the ages, we look back at the ruins of antiquity and see them as bleached remnants of a forgotten time, marbles turned white by centuries of sun. But this image is a profound deception. The ancient world was not a monochrome reality. It was an explosion of brilliant, saturated color. Yet, beneath the beauty of a crimson robe or a sapphire-painted tomb lay a ruthless, high-stakes economic engine. In this series, we do not simply look at art. We track the flow of capital. We investigate how the scarcity of a specific mollusk, the secret alchemy of a furnace, and the control of rare mineral mines defined the rise and fall of empires. Color was the true currency of the ancient world, a silent language of power that could trigger wars, build cathedrals, and stabilize trade routes. Prepare to see the past in a new light as we uncover the hidden history of the pigments that built the bedrock of our modern economic world. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. The genesis of the pigment economy lies in the fundamental human drive for prestige, a psychological trait that predates written history. In the dawn of the ancient world, colors were not readily available commodities. They were gifts of the environment, painstakingly harvested from the earth, the sea, and the biosphere. This early stage of human development, the transition from Paleolithic ochre daubing to the structured pigment industries of the early Bronze Age, marks the birth of the first truly global luxury market. To understand the economics of ancient color, one must first appreciate the concept of technological scarcity. Unlike modern pigments, which can be synthesized in endless quantities by chemical plants, ancient colors were bound by the physical limits of their source material. Whether it was the cinnabar of the mines, the malachite of the mountains, or the murex sea snails of the Levantine coast, the supply was finite, localized, and incredibly difficult to extract. This localized scarcity created the first monopoly zones. If a specific civilization, such as the Minoans or the early Egyptians, controlled the only source of a rare, high-quality pigment, they effectively held the keys to a powerful export industry. The labor involved in this extraction was not merely physical. It was a complex logistical operation. Consider, for example, the sheer volume of sea snails required to produce just 1 gram of Tyrian purple. Tens of thousands of Bolinus brandaris mollusks had to be gathered, crushed, and fermented in a process that was notoriously malodorous and time-consuming. This created a high barrier to entry for any competitor. The cost of production was exorbitant, meaning that the final product was destined only for the wealthiest elite, pharaohs, kings, and high priests. This effectively turned color into a weapon of social stratification. Furthermore, the pigment economy acted as a bridge for cultural and technological exchange. Because the demand for these rare materials was so high, it incentivized the establishment of long-distance trade routes. Merchants would traverse deserts and cross turbulent seas, carrying with them jars of ground pigments and vials of rare dyes. This interaction resulted in the spread of knowledge. As a merchant traded a rare blue pigment, he also traded the technique required to mix it, the tools needed to apply it, and the status associated with its use. Thus, the early pigment economy was a precursor to the modern globalized trade network. It was here that we see the first instances of branding. A specific color associated with a specific region became synonymous with quality and authority. A pigment sourced from a particular mountain range was not merely a material. It was a certificate of origin and a symbol of power. As these civilizations grew, so did the stakes of the pigment trade. The desire for color became an obsession, a pursuit that drove political agendas. Rulers began to understand that the control of pigment sources, the mines and the gathering grounds, was as vital as the control of grain supplies. This shift in understanding transformed the ancient Mediterranean into a chessboard of economic maneuvering. The alchemy of scarcity was not just about the chemical transformation of raw material into paint. It was about the social transformation of scarcity into a value-defining asset. By limiting supply through geographic control and extreme labor demands, the ruling classes of the ancient world ensured that color would remain an exclusive, powerful tool for asserting dominance over their subjects and their rivals. This foundational economy of color set the stage for all subsequent industrial developments, proving that even in the earliest human societies, the market for beauty was one of the most volatile and influential sectors of the global economy. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. If there was one substance that defined the zenith of ancient luxury and economic power, it was the legendary Tyrian purple. Derived from the hypobranchial glands of predatory sea snails, specifically the Bolinus brandaris and Hexaplex trunculus, this dye was not merely a color, it was a liquid empire. The economics of the murex trade represent perhaps the most extreme example of conspicuous consumption in the ancient world. To produce a single gram of pure purple dye, it required the extraction of nearly 10,000 individual snails. The sheer scale of the harvest decimated local mollusk populations and necessitated the creation of massive industrialized processing centers along the Phoenician coast, particularly in cities like Tyre and Sidon. These centers were the primary economic engines of the region, creating a vertical integration that encompassed everything from the fishing fleets to the specialized dyeing workshops. The price of Tyrian purple was intentionally kept astronomical through a combination of extreme labor, scarcity, and state-sanctioned exclusivity. In the Roman period, it became a symbol so potent that its use was legally restricted by the sumptuary laws. To wear the imperial purple was to claim a divine or imperial mandate. This created a bifurcated economy, a black market for lower quality, diluted dyes for the provincial elite, and a highly controlled state-regulated trade for the supreme quality reserved for emperors. The economics here were masterfully manipulated. By controlling the supply of the raw material, the Phoenician guilds, and later the Roman imperial administration, could dictate the value of the color, using it as a tool to consolidate power. The purple robe was a uniform of command, a visual declaration of one's position within the Roman hierarchy, and a direct link between personal wealth and political influence. Furthermore, the murex trade catalyzed advancements in maritime logistics and chemical processing. The smell associated with the fermentation of the snails was so foul that the processing sites were often located downwind from city centers, yet these sites were bustling hubs of innovation. Vintners, chemists, and traders worked in concert to perfect the curing process, where the intensity of the purple could be adjusted from a deep, blood-like crimson to a light, delicate amethyst. The complexity of this chemistry meant that the trade required highly specialized labor. These artisans were not mere workers. They were a protected class, their knowledge guarded as a state secret. The export of this dye to the far corners of the empire, from the foggy shores of Britain to the desert outposts of the Levant, required a sophisticated network of security, transport, and inventory management. The murex trade also provides a harrowing insight into the environmental cost of ancient economic ambition. The sheer ecological devastation caused by the Phoenician murex industry suggests that the ancient world was not as in harmony with nature as romanticized accounts often claim. It was an extractive economy that operated with total disregard for the biological sustainability of the sea, prioritizing immediate profit and the projection of power above the long-term health of the ecosystem. This historical reality serves as a stark reminder that the golden age of ancient commerce was built upon the exploitation of natural resources at a scale that we are only now fully comprehending. The Murex economy was, in every sense, a precursor to the modern luxury industry, where the value of a product is derived not from its intrinsic utility, but from the immense cost of its production and its ability to distinguish the haves from the have-nots in a rigid hierarchical society. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. While Tyrian purple stood as the ultimate marker of exclusionary elite power, the history of blue tells a different, perhaps more complex economic story. The creation of Egyptian blue, the world's first synthetic pigment, represents a monumental leap in ancient industrial chemistry. Unlike the organic dyes of the Mediterranean coast, Egyptian blue, or calcium copper silicate, was a man-made crystalline marvel. This was not a product of simple harvesting. It was a product of high-temperature furnace technology. By fusing silica, copper, calcium, and an alkali flux at precise temperatures, ancient Egyptian craftsmen effectively industrialized the production of color. This shifted the economic power dynamic away from those who controlled natural gathering grounds toward those who controlled the intellectual capital and the high-heat manufacturing infrastructure. The economic brilliance of Egyptian blue lay in its versatility and durability. Because it was a synthetic mineral, it was resistant to sunlight, stable in varying chemical environments, and could be manipulated into different states, from coarse grains used for ground decoration to finely ground powders for delicate frescoes. This made it the workhorse's pigment of the ancient world. It fueled a massive export industry that saw Egyptian blue traded from the banks of the Nile to the furthest reaches of the Roman Empire and beyond. By democratizing the color blue, which had previously been a rare and prohibitively expensive commodity, often relying on imported, unstable materials like azurite or lapis lazuli, the Egyptians created an economic ecosystem based on mass production and brand consistency. However, the democratization of blue was relative. While it was more accessible than purple, the production of Egyptian blue remained a state-guarded intellectual property. The secret of the firing process, the precise ratios of materials, and the mastery of the kiln was closely held by temple workshops and royal guild artisans. This created a new form of economic moat, the technological barrier. It didn't matter if a foreign kingdom had the raw ingredients, if they lacked the precise industrial knowledge to fuse them correctly. Their efforts would result in unusable gray or vitrified slag. Consequently, Egypt became the global epicenter for the supply of this blue, leveraging its technological monopoly to trade for precious metals, incense, and ivory from the sub-Saharan and Near Eastern markets. This pigment also transformed the architecture and the interior design of the ancient world, turning the economic power of the state into a visual language. Massive public works, monumental statuary, and temple ceilings were transformed into vast blue pigmented canvases. This was an economic signal to the populace. The state possessed the power to master the very elements of the earth. From a macroeconomic perspective, the production of Egyptian blue allowed the Egyptian state to achieve economies of scale that were unprecedented. They produced it in such quantities that it became a standard commodity, a stable unit of color that could be inventoried, transported, and sold in bulk. It was the first time in history that a color had its own industrial life cycle. From the sourcing of raw silica and copper to the standardized manufacturing process and the expansive logistics of international trade. In the saga of ancient economics, Egyptian blue was the prototype for the factory system, proving that the state's ability to control the manufacturing process was just as potent as its ability to conquer territory. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. If Egyptian blue was the triumph of industrial synthesis, cinnabar, and its refined counterpart, vermilion, represented the dangerous, high-stakes gamble of mineral extraction. Cinnabar, the bright red ore of mercury sulfide, was one of the most sought-after and feared commodities in the ancient Mediterranean and beyond. Its extraction was not merely a mining operation. It was a hazardous encounter with elemental toxicity. The mines, most famously those in Almadane in Roman Spain, were economic engines that functioned under a brutal system of forced labor. Because the fumes of mercury were known to be lethal, the work was largely delegated to convicts, slaves, and political prisoners. The economics of cinnabar, therefore, were deeply entwined with the penal systems of the Roman Empire, where the price of the pigment was literally measured in human lives and the systemic erasure of the marginalized. This volatile commodity commanded prices that rivaled gold, not only due to the danger of its extraction, but because of the specific chemistry required to transform raw cinnabar into the vibrant, opaque pigment known as vermilion. When heated in a sealed environment, the cinnabar sublimates and reforms into a brilliant red crystalline structure. This alchemical transformation was a closely guarded secret of the state. Rome, in particular, exercised a near-total monopoly over the Almadane mines, treating the site as a strategic asset of the highest order. The output of these mines was strictly controlled, with the supply often restricted to the capital, to ensure that the pigment remained an exclusive marker of Roman political and military authority. The vivid vermilion used to paint the triumphal statues of generals and the walls of the most opulent villas was a visual manifestation of Rome's total dominion over its subjects and its resources. The economic reach of vermilion extended deep into the Mediterranean trade network, serving as a primary currency for international diplomacy and high-level trade. It was often used to pay for military campaigns or to bribe high-ranking officials in client states. Because of its extreme value and the difficulty of transporting a material that was both toxic and brittle, specialized secure transport units were established. This created a secondary tier of the economy dedicated solely to the security of the pigment. The logistical cost of moving cinnabar from the Spanish hinterlands to the markets of Rome or the cities of the East added a massive premium to the price, making it a true prestige commodity that bypassed the reach of the merchant middle class and concentrated wealth at the very pinnacle of society. Beyond the trade, the environmental and biological impact of the cinnabar economy was a silent, long-term catastrophe. The processing of mercury-rich ores left vast areas of the Spanish landscape poisoned, rendering the land uninhabitable for generations. This economic model, which prioritized the immediate extraction of wealth through the sacrificial use of human labor and the permanent contamination of the environment, mirrors modern industrial practices in an eerily familiar way. The pigment was a double-edged sword. It provided the brilliant blood-red color that defined the aesthetic of the ancient world, but it did so by weaponizing the Earth's most toxic elements. By analyzing the cinnabar trade, we uncover the hidden cost of ancient aesthetic perfection, a system that was willing to pollute the soil and destroy the body for the sake of a color that, while beautiful, was fundamentally born from the dark chemistry of the Earth. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. While minerals and sea creatures commanded the headlines of the pigment market, the economy of yellow, specifically the spectrum ranging from humble ochre to the liquid gold of saffron, revealed the subtle nuances of ancient value systems. Ochre, the oldest pigment in human history, was the backbone of the mass-market economy. Easily sourced from iron-rich clay deposits, it was the universal color of antiquity. Its economic power lay not in its rarity, but in its ubiquity and reliability. It was the standard currency of the common artisan, a low-cost, high-volume commodity that allowed even the most modest workshops to produce vibrant, durable imagery. However, at the other end of the spectrum sat saffron, the most expensive, labor-intensive, and culturally loaded yellow dye in the ancient world. Derived from the delicate Crocus sativus flower, it required tens of thousands of stigmas to produce just a tiny quantity of color. The economics of saffron were a study in extreme specialization and climate dependency. Unlike the centralized mines of Cinnabar or the coastal factories of the Murex, saffron cultivation was a fragmented, highly sensitive agricultural endeavor. It demanded specific soil conditions, precise timing of the harvest, and a massive, dexterous labor force to pick the flowers before the morning sun wilted them. This made saffron the ultimate prestige yellow, a luxury item that was traded as an apothecary's miracle, a culinary status symbol, and a dye for the garments of the ultra-wealthy. Because of its intense fragility, the saffron trade was one of the most high-risk sectors of the ancient economy. A single bad harvest or a disrupted trade route could cause prices to skyrocket, making it a favorite instrument for economic speculation among wealthy merchants. The tension between these two yellows, the ubiquitous ochre and the rarefied saffron, defined the visual landscape of the ancient world. Ochre was the color of the earth, the foundation of public infrastructure, and the uniform of the commoner. Saffron was the color of the sun, the crown, and the divine. This dichotomy was not just aesthetic, it was an economic barrier. A Roman or Greek citizen could easily discern the wealth of an individual simply by the shade and quality of the yellow they wore. The state recognized this, often using yellow shading as a legal designation. Laws sometimes dictated what quality of yellow could be worn in public settings, preventing the upwardly mobile middle class from masquerading as elites. Thus, the supply chain of these two pigments helped reinforce the rigidity of the social structure. Furthermore, the cultivation of saffron fostered unique economic relationships between empires. Saffron became a prized diplomatic gift, a soft power commodity that was traded between empires in the Levant, Greece, and as far east as the Indus Valley. It established an early form of niche market economics. Merchants specializing in saffron developed specialized knowledge of botany, soil management, and long-distance cold chain logistics, or the ancient equivalent of it, to keep the product from degrading. This created a class of specialized traders whose wealth was tied not to the brute force of mining, but to the delicate stewardship of the land. In the history of pigments, the yellow spectrum proves that while mineral extraction fueled the wars of empires, agriculture fueled the fine-tuned trade networks that connected them, demonstrating that economic power could be built on the back of a flower just as effectively as on the back of a slave. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. If the yellow spectrum was defined by the delicacy of agriculture, the blue of lapis lazuli, the stone of heaven, was defined by the sheer, brutal geography of the Silk Road. Found exclusively in the inaccessible, jagged mountains of the Sari Sang mines in modern-day Afghanistan, lapis lazuli was the most precious blue pigment of the ancient world. Its economic story is one of the earliest examples of a globalized commodity chain. The journey of this stone from the remote peaks of the Hindu Kush to the workshops of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and eventually the Mediterranean involved a complex network of middlemen, caravan masters, and regional power brokers. The economics of lapis were governed by extreme scarcity and the logistical nightmare of transporting fragile, heavy mineral ore across thousands of miles of hostile, mountainous terrain. This trade route turned the Central Asian highlands into a critical economic corridor. Every merchant tribe, nomadic confederation, and city-state that sat along the path of the lapis trade levied taxes, demanded protection money, or enforced monopolies on the movement of the stone. This essentially taxed the pigment at every stage of its journey, inflating its price to levels that made it synonymous with divine favor. In the ancient world, lapis was not just a commodity. It was a unit of high-level diplomacy. It was sent as tribute between kings, utilized as the central inlay in the funerary masks of pharaohs, and crushed into the most exquisite, ultramarine paint for the wealthiest temples. The cost of lapis lazuli effectively funded the development of entire caravan cities, as the wealth generated from the blue stone trade allowed for the construction of markets, fortifications, and sophisticated banking systems along the Silk Road. The processing of lapis into paint, a technique that was perfected much later but hinted at in early experimental workshops, involved a labor-intensive method of grinding and washing the stone to separate the precious blue lazurite from the cheaper white calcite and golden pyrite impurities. This meant that the final product was not just a natural material. It was a refined, engineered luxury. The economic moat here was geographic and physical. Because the source was so isolated and the route so perilous, no single empire could fully monopolize the supply. Instead, it created a decentralized, highly competitive market where middlemen held more power than the producers themselves. This led to a unique economic phenomenon where the brand of the stone was so powerful that the market remained stable, despite constant political upheavals in the regions through which it traveled. The lapis trade also highlights the profound social impact of exotics capital. Because it was so rare, the ownership of lapis lazuli served as a primary indicator of a civilization's reach. A kingdom that possessed large quantities of lapis was a kingdom that had the power to secure trade routes far beyond its borders. It was a projection of soft power, a way to show to rivals and subjects alike that the state's influence extended to the very edges of the known world. As we look at the economic history of pigments, lapis lazuli stands as the ultimate proof that scarcity can define political legitimacy. The cost of a blue painting was never just the price of the groundstone. It was the cost of the armies that guarded the caravans, the bribes paid to mountain chieftains, and the sheer human effort required to bring a piece of a distant, inaccessible mountain range into the heart of a palace. It was the birth of luxury branding on a global scale. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. If the lapis lazuli trade represents the high-stakes, hyper-connected luxury of the ancient world, the economics of earth pigments, the various shades of iron oxides, represent the foundational, structural bedrock of the ancient pigment market. While we often fixate on the exotic and the dangerous, the vast majority of the ancient world's color was sourced from the ground beneath people's feet. Hematite, limonite, and goethite, the ores that provide the spectrum of reds, yellows, and browns, were the essential building blocks of the color economy. Their economics were governed by the principle of geological ubiquity. Because these materials were found almost everywhere, they did not command the massive prices of cinnabar or lapis. but their market volume was astronomical. They were the commodities that powered the massive public works, the sprawling urban facades, and the everyday aesthetic of the common citizen. The economic genius of the earth pigment trade lay in its hyper-local distribution models. Because it was inefficient to transport low-value, heavy mineral ores over long distances, the ancient world developed a network of local pigment processing hubs. Every significant city or major military garrison had its own dedicated pigment kilns and grinding mills, sourcing raw material from the nearest ridge or riverbed. This created a decentralized but remarkably standardized economic network. Even though the source was local, the quality was consistent because the methods of refining, washing, levigation, and calcination were universal. This standardization allowed for a predictable visual language across the Roman and Hellenistic worlds. An architect in Gaul could rely on the same color profiles as an architect in Egypt, facilitating a sense of imperial unity through shared aesthetic standards. However, the earth pigment trade was also a site of significant economic innovation. It was here that the first pigment grading systems emerged. Artisans developed sophisticated ways to test the purity and saturation of iron-rich earths, creating different price tiers based on the refinement of the material. A raw, unrefined ochre was the cheapest bulk material, sold by the cartload for foundations and lower-class housing. A highly levigated, kiln-fired red oxide was a premium-grade product, reserved for the intricate frescoes of villa interiors and public monuments. This tiered pricing allowed for a massive expansion of the pigment market, enabling the state to optimize its spending on public infrastructure. It was an early form of value engineering, where the use of color was strategically calibrated to the prestige and budget of a specific architectural project. The economic importance of these pigments also extended to the labor market. The processing of earth pigments required a steady, semi-skilled workforce of processors, washers, and kiln tenders. Unlike the dangerous mercury mines or the elite guarded lapis trade, the earth pigment industry provided a stable, year-round economy for urban populations. It was a middle-class industry, characterized by small-scale workshops, family-run enterprises, and local guild regulation. This fostered a resilient economic sector that could survive the collapse of long-distance trade routes or the political volatility of the time. In the broader context of ancient history, these pigments were the true stabilizers of the market. They provided the visual continuity that bonded civilizations together, proving that the most influential economic forces are often the ones that are the most available, the most reliable, and the most deeply integrated into the daily life of the common people. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. If iron oxides were the foundation of the colorful world, carbon-based pigments, soot, charcoal, and ivory black, were the essential dark accents that provided depth, definition, and contrast to ancient art. The economics of black were fundamentally different from the extractive mining or agricultural harvesting of other colors. Black pigments were, in essence, the byproducts of the ancient energy economy. Whether sourced from the controlled burning of vine stalks, the collection of soot from oil lamps in temple complexes, or the charred remains of bones in funerary rites, black was a material that bridged the gap between waste and utility. This created an economy rooted in circular resource management. The most valued black, often called atramentum, was meticulously harvested from specialized kilns or from the residue of the great public building projects, making it a byproduct of urban life itself. The economic model of black pigments was one of low production costs but high secondary utility. Because it required no rare geological search and no dangerous extraction, the barrier to entry was minimal, making black the most democratized color in the ancient market. However, this did not mean it was low value. The professional black, produced in controlled environments to ensure a consistent, velvety texture, was a critical component of the manuscript, ink, and high-end fresco industries. The rise of literacy, the state's need for official record-keeping, and the development of intricate wall painting styles created a massive, constant demand for carbon-based inks and pigments. The state-run ink workshops became silent, essential hubs of information and bureaucracy, serving the administrative needs of empires that spanned continents. Interestingly, the trade of black pigments also highlights the emergence of specialized branding. Certain regions became famous for the depth and permanence of their black pigments. For instance, the use of vine black, produced from charred grape stalks, was considered superior in the Mediterranean, prized for its specific undertones and its ability to mix smoothly with other mineral pigments. This gave regional centers a unique economic competitive advantage. Merchants who could guarantee a consistent supply of refined, impurity-free carbon black held a reliable position in the trade network. It was a trade built not on the scarcity of the source material, but on the sophistication of the burning process. The alchemists who mastered the kiln temperature and the oxygen intake to create these deep, stable blacks were just as important to the artistic economy as the miners of Cinnabar. Moreover, the black pigment economy was inherently tied to the availability of timber and biomass, making it a reflection of the environmental footprint of ancient cities. As cities grew and the demand for energy increased, the production of carbon black followed. It was an industry that expanded in parallel with urbanization, proving that even in the ancient world, industrial byproduct utilization was a key economic strategy. The reliance on black was also a reliance on the stability of the energy supply. If the fires stopped burning, the ink for the scrolls and the paint for the temples ran dry. In the broader landscape of ancient commerce, black pigment served as the binding agent of the bureaucracy and the defining edge of the artistic aesthetic. They were the color of information, order, and shadow, providing the necessary contrast that allowed the vibrant reds, yellows, and blues of the empire to truly stand out. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. If the other colors were symbols of status, mining extraction, or administrative order, the green spectrum, dominated by malachite and the synthetic verdigris, was the color of organic life, rejuvenation, and, paradoxically, of aggressive chemical manipulation. Malachite, a copper carbonate mineral, was the natural, reliable green of the ancient world. Found frequently near copper ore deposits, its mining was often a secondary activity in the larger, profit-driven copper smelting operations. This made malachite a byproduct of the Metal Age, its economic value tied directly to the growth of the bronze industry. As empires expanded their metallurgical capacity to forge weapons and tools, they inadvertently flooded the market with a steady supply of high-quality green pigment. The economics of malachite, therefore, were inherently tethered to the military-industrial complex of antiquity. In contrast to the natural malachite, verdigris, the green pigment produced by the reaction of copper with acetic acid, vinegar, represented an early, sophisticated mastery of chemical aging. It was a synthetic shortcut. By placing copper plates in sealed vats with fermenting wine or vinegar, ancient artisans could artificially accelerate the process of oxidation, yielding a vibrant, albeit unstable, green pigment. The economics of verdigris were driven by the agricultural and food processing sectors. Since it required wine vinegar and copper, it was an industry that thrived in regions with a strong viticulture base and established copper metallurgy. This created a cross-industry economic dependency, where the color green relied as much on the winemaker as it did on the metalworker. The market for these greens was unique because of their chemical reactivity. Both malachite and verdigris were notorious for their instability. Verdigris, in particular, could react with other pigments and turn black or brown over time. This forced a specialized artisan economy to emerge. Painters and decorators had to be chemists in their own right, developing complex layering techniques, protective varnishes, and binding agents to seal the green and prevent degradation. This fostered an economy of knowledge. Master artists and gilders who possessed the secret recipes for stabilizing verdigris commanded premium fees, far exceeding the cost of the raw material itself. It was the birth of the technological premium, where the value was not in the substance, but in the expert application of chemical knowledge. This green economy also speaks to the ancient world's perception of value. Because green was the color of nature, and nature was often seen as something to be tamed, harnessed, and decorated. The ability to reproduce the perfect leaf green, or sea green, was a sign of a society's sophistication. It was the color of gardens, of prestige textiles, and of the detailed landscapes that decorated the villas of the wealthy. The trade in these pigments required a logistical awareness of copper supply chains and vinegar production, linking rural farming economies with urban artisanal centers. In the broader history of pigments, the green spectrum demonstrates that economic power was not just about control over rare, distant stones, but also about the ability to transform everyday industrial outputs, like copper scrap and spoiled wine. The vibrant, lifelike colors that brought the static world of stone and plaster to life. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. If the earth pigments were the foundation and the mineral pigments the luxury, the Tyrian purple, or Murex purple, was the absolute summit of exclusionary economic power. Derived from the glandular secretions of predatory sea snails, specifically Bolinus brandaris, the production of this color was a brutal, industrial-scale act of biological harvesting. The economics of purple were dictated by the sheer biological scarcity. It took approximately 10,000 to 12,000 snails to produce a single gram of dye. This necessitated a supply chain that spanned the entire Mediterranean basin, involving hundreds of thousands of man-hours in catching, crushing, and processing these mollusks. The smell alone, described by ancient sources as a putrid stench, ensured that the industry was physically pushed to the margins of society, yet its economic value placed it at the very center of imperial politics. The purple economy functioned as an ancient luxury cartel. Because the production process was so laborious and the source so biologically limited, the output was strictly controlled by the state. This created a profound economic barrier. Purple was not a commodity that could be bought by the wealthy merchant class. It was a symbol of state-granted privilege. Laws, such as the Roman sumptuary laws, were enacted to prevent anyone but the emperor or the highest-ranking officials from wearing garments dyed in full Tyrian purple. This transformed the color into a form of fiscal currency. By restricting the supply to specific tiers of the elite, the state ensured that the color retained its status as a store of extreme wealth, effectively making the garment itself a high-value asset that could be traded, inherited, or used as a form of diplomatic capital. The logistical scale of this industry was truly unprecedented. Entire coastal towns, such as those in modern-day Lebanon, ancient Phoenicia, or the North African coast, were dedicated factories. These sites were massive, purpose-built industrial zones where the ocean was, in effect, mined for its biological riches. The economic influence of these purple cities was so immense that they held sway over maritime trade routes, often dictating the terms of trade for other goods like incense, grain, and metals. The purple trade was a precursor to modern monopoly capitalism, where a single resource, backed by state decree and physical barriers to entry, could dictate the economic stability of entire regions. It was an industry that didn't just produce a color, it produced hierarchy. Moreover, the purple economy illustrates a darker truth about the ancient world. The commodification of the living environment. The overexploitation of murex populations suggests an early, catastrophic failure of sustainable resource management, where the demand for a status-signifying color eventually drove the local extinction of the species in certain waters. This reminds us that the history of pigments is also a history of ecological impact. The purple trade was a violent, high-stakes game, where the state invested heavily in the destruction of the sea to project an image of divine, untouchable power. It stands as the ultimate example of how the desire for aesthetic perfection, when untethered from resource reality, can distort the entire economic landscape of an empire, making the pursuit of royalty the costliest ambition of the ancient world. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. As the ancient world matured, the reliance on rare minerals, biological harvesting, and geographical luck became an economic bottleneck. This was the era of the early alchemists and pigment engineers, craftsmen who realized that the future of wealth lay not in finding the best deposit, but in mastering the transformation of cheap materials. The economics of this transition were driven by the desire for replicability. If a workshop could produce a stable, vibrant substitute for a rare stone like lapis, or an expensive dye like Tyrian purple using common substances like clays, lead, or metallic salts, they would essentially be printing value. This marked the birth of the industrial research and development model. The economic shift was subtle, but profound. It moved the center of gravity from the mine to the laboratory. Workshops began to operate more like secretive patent offices. Recipes for synthetic pigments, such as Egyptian blue, the first true synthetic pigment, lead white, or the artificial vermilion, were guarded with a fervor previously reserved for state secrets. These recipes were intellectual property. A master artisan who possessed a refined, reliable formula for a high-demand color could charge a premium that accounted not just for labor, but for the proprietary technology of the synthesis. This created a new tier of elite craftsmanship, the pigment chemist, whose knowledge was a commodity more portable and durable than any mineral deposit. This drive for synthetic alternatives also sparked a new kind of standardization in international trade. As synthetic pigments became more refined, they created a common denominator for artists across borders. An architect working in Roman Britain could use the same synthetic pigment as an artist in Alexandria, reducing the dependency on localized, inconsistent, natural sources. This technological globalization reduced the cost of large-scale construction and decorative projects, allowing for the rapid spread of aesthetic styles across the empire. It was an economic multiplier. By lowering the barrier to entry for high-quality color, the state and the wealthy could commission more, larger, and more elaborate projects, fueling a boom in the decorative arts sector. However, this transition had a hidden cost: the systemic health impact on the workforce and the environment. The pursuit of artificial perfection was often achieved through the heavy use of lead, arsenic, and mercury, elements that, while chemically potent, were biologically devastating. The economic successes of synthetic pigments was built on the backs of laborers who worked in poorly ventilated, high-toxicity environments. We see here the early foundations of the industrial paradox. The same chemical advancements that enabled the artistic heights of the classical world also established the first patterns of industrial toxicity that would haunt future generations. The synthetic dawn was, in many ways, an era of brilliant innovation, masking a silent, mounting human and environmental liability. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey. As we reach the final act of this pigment-driven saga, it becomes clear that the ancient history of color was never merely an artistic pursuit. It was the story of humanity's first attempt at global economic integration. From the brutal extraction of ochre to the hyper-luxury of the Tyrian purple, the color spectrum acted as a barometer for imperial reach, technological sophistication, and social stratification. The pigments were not just decorative additions to the surfaces of the ancient world. They were the very threads of the economic fabric that held together disparate cultures. This globalized palette required the synchronization of mines in the Hindu Kush, dye factories in the Levant, vinegar vats in Greece, and laboratories in Egypt. It was a complex, fragile, and intensely competitive network that established the blueprint for modern international trade. The economic legacy of these colors lies in the concept of value attribution. The ancient world taught us that value is not intrinsic to a material, but constructed through scarcity, rarity, and the narrative of prestige. Whether it was the stone of heaven, lapis, or the imperial blood, purple, the market was driven by the ability of the state to curate desire. This practice, the institutionalization of luxury, remains the fundamental logic of our modern high-end markets. We see the echoes of the Roman sumptuary laws in the scarcity-based marketing strategies of contemporary fashion, where the value of a product is determined less by its utility and more by its restricted access. The ancient pigment trade was the world's first lesson in how to turn a physical resource into a cultural symbol of power. However, this history also serves as a warning about the cost of progress. The synthetic dawn showed us that the desire for efficiency and scale often blinds us to the toxic consequences of our industrial systems. The legacy of the ancient color economy is written in the environmental scars of the Sar-Isang mines, the chemical poisoning of urban artisanal districts, and the catastrophic loss of marine biodiversity along the Phoenician coast. These pigments, which brought such brilliance to the ancient world, were simultaneously catalysts for the first man-made ecological crises. Our modern obsession with cheap, durable, and vibrant synthetic materials is a direct, albeit more advanced, continuation of the same economic trajectory established thousands of years ago. Ultimately, the history of pigments reveals that humanity's progress is defined by our relationship with the materials we extract from the earth. The ancient world didn't just paint its temples and scrolls. It used color to map the limits of its power and the depths of its ingenuity. As we look at the world today, we see that the palette has expanded, but the economic principles remain remarkably static. We are still chasing the rare blue. We are still industrializing the natural, and we are still struggling to balance the brilliance of our aesthetic achievements with the health of the world that provides them. The ancient pigment economy didn't disappear. It evolved. It remains the silent, colorful undercurrent of our own globalized world, reminding us that every shade we see, every product we desire, and every value we assign is part of a story that began at the dawn of civilization. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, follow us, and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our upcoming historical journey.